is long overdue. We don't want a piece of freedom. We want the whole package.
The city of Evanston has pledged to give reparations to black residents.
This is American history.
We want cash payment.
Give us what we're due.
I don't know why they would be given more status than any other group of people.
It was a crime, but no one paid the price.
The Big Payback, Monday at 10 or stream at nepm.org. You're watching New England Public Media on WGBY Springfield.
In the 1960s, the air of resistance and turbulence helped create hip-hop. Hip-hop became our voice that was for so long silenced.
How hip-hop changed the world, January 31st, or stream at nepm.org.
Coming up, we're connecting you with the creativity and culture in your community, including a collective art project that's raising awareness and funds to help fight food insecurity.
And I wanted it to be like all about community and getting people to work together to do something creative together.
An annual holiday tradition draws to a close after 30 years.
Next year I made a whole bunch of handmade plywood picture type of decorations. People just started to come up on the lawn.
And a couple of familiar faces and voices from local radio join us here at NEPM.
Stop it.
Join us for those stories and more as we explore the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. Up next on Connecting Point.
Support for Connecting Point is provided by our contributing viewers.
Welcome, and thanks for joining us for Connecting Point, your source for creativity, culture, and community. I'm Saidalis Bauer. Every week, we explore all that the region has to offer, and today we're coming to you from our home base, the studios at New England Public Media, where we have some exciting news to share. We'll have more on that a little later in the program, but our first story today takes us to Berkshire County. This past Christmas marked the end of a long-time holiday tradition in the northern Berkshires. After illuminating his home in North Adams with a fabulous display of lights every December for the past 3 decades, Wayne Arnold decided that 2022 would be his last. But before the year drew to a close, Connecting Point's Brian Sullivan paid a visit to the corner of East Main Street and Park Ave for one final look at the display, which has brought so much joy to thousands over the years.
It's probably a safe bet to say that in every town, in every county, in every state, there's always that one person who takes their Christmas decorating skills to a level that far exceeds all of their neighbors. But here in Massachusetts' smallest city, the locals don't seem to mind bestowing those duties upon one man. Of course, a collection like this one doesn't accrue overnight.
I think the whole thing started when I was a kid. We used to go down and see my aunt every Thanksgiving, and coming back home, we go down Main Street of East Hampton, and they would always have their decorations up by then. So I always thought that was a pretty cool thing, and when I became a homeowner, I said, well, let's try some decorations. So the first year was probably 5 or 6 sets of lights around the pillars out front, and next year I made a whole bunch of handmade plywood picture type of decorations, and that's led from 1988, 1989, from 5 or 6 things in the yard to almost 400 this year, not quite though.
Included in those nearly 400 decorations are over 1,000 extension cords, 1,200 feet of cable, and 12,000 lights. And while this yard here on the corner of East Main and Park Ave in North Adams has become a destination for folks from all over for the better part of the past 3 decades, Wayne Arnold's original intent was to just put some decorations out on the lawn.
People really didn't start coming on the lawn, I don't think, until about 4 or 5 years after I started. And that was actually quite by mistake. People just started to come up on the lawn. So then the following year I said, well, that's a pretty good idea. So we put a sign out front that said, you're welcome to look around and see what there is.
And see what there is, they have done. Kids and adults have been getting a kick out of walking through this ornamental maze of flashing lights and music for generations. But all of the visitors to the property in 2022 would be the last to see this yard in all its glory, because sadly, all good things must come to an end. It was a realization that Arnold had not from looking at his electric bill, but from seeing just how much work was involved in making a float for when he was chosen as Grand Marshal in the 2022 Fall Parade.
While I was doing that, I said, yeah, this is it. I'm ready. You know, athletes say they know when they want to retire, and I guess that's the way it hit me.
It remains to be seen exactly what happens with all of these decorations, but one thing is for sure, 2023 marks the beginning of a new era here on this corner lot. And while 467 East Main Street will just be another yard like any other, surely someone will take the baton and have a very bright future, at least during the month of December.
Well, it's probably going to be a dark yard, unfortunately. But there's people around, you know. There's a Sampson house down the street. There's other people that seem to be doing more and more every year to keep the lights on. So, yeah, there's life after the Arnolds.
Every week, Connecting Point explores the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. But it doesn't stop there. You can find us online anytime for exclusive features and content. And in this week's digital exclusive, North Adams resident Wayne Arnold reflects on the most lasting memories from his annual Arnold Family Christmas display, which came to a close this past Christmas after 30 years.
You know, listening to the laughter of the kids was always good. Nothing like the sound of a laughing kid, as far as I'm concerned.
You can find that digital exclusive online right now at nepm.org/connectingpoint. On January 14th, the Springfield Symphony Orchestra celebrates the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with its Audacity of Hope concert. The orchestra will be led by guest conductor Kevin Scott and will also feature a special spoken word presentation by Springfield's poet laureate Magdalena Gómez. I spoke with Scott and Gómez to learn more about their artistic collaboration and the importance of inclusivity in the creative arts.
I've always felt that poetry is to be performed either as theater or as a companion with music, because poetry is rhythm, and rhythm is something that comes naturally from the circadian rhythms of the body, from the heart. When we speak, when we make any kind of intonation, any kind of sound, we are born to music. And words are also meant to be have their own musicality in everyday life, not just in poetry. But there's a musicality and tonality that we use when we speak, and it changes depending on who we're speaking to. Like when I speak with someone like you and with Kevin, I'm really happy. So those, rhythms change.
And this is a pretty monumental concert. Kevin, you focus on the works of all Black composers. And you are known for advocating for new, unknown, neglected composers. And while you have a focus on all eras of music, you really like to pay attention to the African American composers. What misconceptions or challenges have you faced being a Black composer and conductor yourself?
A lot. The problem has been that society has pigeonholed classical music as a domain of white European males who have dominated the repertoire for centuries. And this is true. But there have been Black composers who have been there at the same time. The problem is very few people know of this legacy. For example, Vicente Lusitano, the first Black composer who emanated from Portugal. And then the next known major composer would be Joseph Boulogne, known as the Chevalier de Saint-Georges, a friend of Haydn and Mozart. And then you have other composers like Justin Holland, a Black man from America who emigrated to Europe. He was a guitar virtuoso. Francis Johnson was a great bandmaster who played before Queen Victoria. So many other composers, you can't even begin to name the composers by Black. You have George Walker, who was the first Black composer to win the Pulitzer Prize in music, Julia Perry, Adolphus Hailstork. In the present day, you have people like Jesse Montgomery, Michael Abels, best known for his scores for the Jordan Peele movies, Chris Bowers, who's done Bridgerton. He's also wrote a very wonderful violin concerto, and many, many, many other composers I can't even begin to name. I mean, but the legacy is there. And yet people still don't know it.
And Magdalena, part of your artistic vision is to build unity and create intimacy through empathy. How are the creative arts a means to expand cultural conversations?
What the arts do, I think my goal for them is that they help us let go of ego and stop thinking about success in life as material capital, but start seeing success in life in how unified we can be as people, because that is our greatest social capital, is being unified. And when people go to the arts, whether it be the theater or visual art, in a museum, you look at something, you're looking at the person next to you, what do they think? There's always some kind of interaction that's happening, whether spoken or unspoken. Things happen in audiences. I always want audiences to feel, oh, I know what that feels like. Mm-hmm. And that's why I try to write, in the vernacular of the everyday, in the words of the everyday, because it's important that we meet each other in the art. And that's what art is for me. It's a meeting place where we can unabashedly, lovingly, and freely express the most intimate parts of ourselves with each other, even with strangers. And in truth, there really aren't any strangers.
So reflecting on the legacy of Dr. King and his notion that one should be judged on the content of your character and not the color of your skin, where do you see the classical musical genre heading in the next generations? Or I guess more importantly, where does it need to head to achieve more inclusivity?
I think people need to hear the music first and then realize who wrote the music. Meet the composer. Understand who they are first. Now, we're going to have a pre-concert lecture before the concert, and they're going to meet myself, Ozzy, and Quinn Mason, and we're going to talk about our music, our experiences, and hopefully the audience will understand where we're coming from. One of the things about Black composers is that the first thing people will think is, oh, we're going to be just bringing in a whole gang of arrangements like Barry White. Nothing wrong with Barry White. He was a great composer and arranger himself. But that's the thing, is, again, the stereotype. They think that the music is going to sound like the Barry White Orchestra. And they hear, oh no, this is something totally different. I mean, we can bring rap, we can bring gospel, we can bring folk, we can bring soul, we can bring jazz, we can bring all that. But at the same time, we still honor and respect the great tradition that started in the symphony with Haydn and Mozart and worked its way up into the present day.
And Magdalena, do you want to share some of your closing thoughts about just everything we've been talking about today and the event in general?
Yes, I do. For me, this event is an opportunity for Springfield and our region to come together and experience an historic moment, which really shouldn't be an historic moment. It is the 21st century after all, but it is happening. And we need to celebrate and honor it. And it's going to be an intergenerational gathering. It's going to be something that says, we will not look at classical music only through a white supremacist Eurocentric lens, which is what had always turned me off about classical music in the United States, because I didn't know as the library of Kevin. And he's opening my heart and eyes. And I loved classical music, European classical music, even when I was in high school and college. But I also knew that all of the continents of this planet have classical music. I consider the music of the Aboriginal people of Australia a form of classical music. And it's a music that really informed and touched my soul, my writing, and opened my mind to be a better writer. So I see this as the opportunity to move across racial, ethnic, age, identity, just break down all those barriers. Come be with this music. Come be with these people that just want to love you and be with you. And let's make it happen together, because the audience is as important as every performer.
In December, artist Jo Hesse began a collective art project, a community festival, and a fundraiser all rolled into one called the Social Fabric Project to benefit the food center of Western Mass. Using colored scraps she had collected throughout the year as well as wool donated from local farmers, Hesse, along with members of the community, created a large felt rug that will be auctioned off in January at Bombyx Center for Arts and Equity in Florence. Producer Dave Frazier brings us the story.
Inside the Bombyx Center in Florence, Massachusetts, a unique community event is taking place. The creation of a large felt rug using colored scraps as well as wool donated from local farmers. The project is being organized by felt maker and artist Jo Hesse, her dad, and a small group of volunteers.
I work with my dad to make medium-sized rugs, but I've always wanted to make bigger rugs, and I wanted it to be like all about community and getting people to work together to do something creative together in the first part of the project, and then to kind of synchronize our bodies and like work together in a almost like a dance.
At this year's rug-making project, Hesse used percussionists and improvisational musicians to jam to the rhythm of the rug maker's work. Hesse says they help keep the beat for felt makers while creating another layer of spontaneous communal art.
Drumming is mainly because we're working with a lot of people, and if everyone isn't synchronized, it's really hard to move the rug forward. So especially when you have new people, that it just really helps to have the drum.
The first few weeks of the project were spent designing the surface and arranging the colors of the rug. Then the group moved on to turning the wool into cloth, using traditional techniques that Hesse learned when she traveled to Turkey.
I went to Turkey to learn more about felt making and specifically to learn how to make rugs, because a lot of the felt making that you would encounter around here would just be small things or thin, like garments, thin felt. Starts out really big and fluffy and airy and like soft. The stomping and beating of the fibers kind of shocks them into tighter and tighter tangles. By the time you're done, it's like this very hard leather-like fabric that's almost half the size of the original.
The collaborative aspect is what Hesse finds most exciting about her work, the moments of complete community, where creativity, physical activity, and resources are shared, and something is able to be produced that one person alone would not have been able to do.
Last year when we did it, I didn't tell people anything about what to do. Everyone could just do whatever they wanted for the pattern, and people didn't really think about each other or the whole. They just did their own thing and left. And so this year I did this circular medallion, and I did some lines in it so that it had a form, thinking that people would then think about the whole more, and they really did. They were like, oh, there's pink over here, and so let's bring some pink to this side, and or there's like little squiggles over here, so let's bring that over here.
Later this month, the finished rug will be auctioned off, and the proceeds will be donated to the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts.
And if you enjoyed that story, you can find more online as felt maker and artist Jo Hesse discusses how she decided who would receive the proceeds from the auction of her community rug project in a digital extra.
Just thinking what would be like the most universally helpful thing that we could do that everyone would agree with, helps the most amount of people, also like all over Western Mass.
That digital extra is available online at nepm.org/connectingpoint. Well, the news is out. Monte Belmonte and Khalees Smith, longtime radio personalities in the Pioneer Valley, have joined New England Public Media to create a new radio show and podcast centered around community. So what brought Monte and Khalees to public media, and what can we expect from their new show? I sat down with my new colleagues to find out more about them and what they have in store for listeners in the region.
What I really loved doing on the mornings with the river was to play a lot of music and things, but also to have interesting conversations with the interesting people of the valley. So not unlike what you do at Connecting Point, finding those stories and bringing them to the airwaves. And I won't be doing it at waking up at 2:15 in the morning anymore, which takes its toll after a decade and a half plus. So, yeah, I think a lot of the same things and sensibilities that I brought to that show, I'm hoping to bring to NEPM.
Well, and I know that you also said it's a different format, so you're not going to be spinning records. You'll have more time to have conversations with people. What are you most looking forward to with this new venture?
Well, I'm most looking forward to being able to focus on that, to spend more time focusing and brainstorming and thinking about who I want to have conversations with. I was doing a lot of plate spinning at the other job and carrying a lot of responsibilities apart from just the show. So really being able to dig into those conversations and to think big picture and maybe go after some bigger questions in like a series, those kind of things are what I'm pretty excited about.
And Khalees, you and Monte have built up a great rapport with each other, working alongside at the River. What will your role be in this new radio show and podcast?
Oh, I think a little bit of a foil for that. Because Monte likes, well, it's not that we're both not invested in community, because we clearly are, but one of the things that I didn't get a chance to do as much of was talk to some of those artists that were coming through town and like some of the people that were making like creatively things that I was really interested in. So I think some of those conversations are a lot more of what I will end up doing and bringing onto us. Still focusing a lot on the arts and culture.
Which makes sense because as a multi-talented artist like yourself, you're part of several bands and you are an established writer. I guess it makes sense for you to be focusing on the arts and culture in the region.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm interested in.
And why the switch to public media? What drove that decision?
I've always been a fan of public media, or at least, well, when I was a little kid, I grew up watching Sesame Street and The Electric Company and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, so that's so formative for me as a human being. And then in college, I was turned on to public radio, very intentionally when I started my radio show on commercial radio, modeled it after a lot of the things I liked in public media, where there can be a little bit of tongue-in-cheek humor, but you're really digging into some meaningful conversations. You're not just going for the lowest common denominator to try to get ratings. And I've been likening public media to food co-ops, let's say, where you can go to any supermarket and get food, that's great, but you get a little bit more invested in the community, and there's something more than just sheer dollars and cents involved when you go and shop at a food co-op. You become a member. It's part of community building, and I believe that's what public media does too, so it really feels like an honor to be a part of it.
And I mean, investing in community is your thing. You've been a champion for the community. You're well known for Monte's March, which supports the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts. Why have you always decided to make being a community champion part of your work as an entertainer?
Because I can't allow myself, I guess, morally to go for those lowest common denominators just to get attention, and I really feel like community is kind of all we've got. You know, our neighborhoods and who we are with each other as human beings is all we've got. It's what ultimately ends up being the most important to people. And if we can better connect our neighborhoods and then better connect the 413 to the other individual neighborhoods and exploring the different parts that we might not have known about, that's why I feel like it's all that really matters.
Yeah, I mean, at the base of like everything that we're looking at and everything that we're making, like, is community and making those bonds stronger, like whether it be through arts and culture or just simple conversations with people doing interesting things, or like rediscovering cool things about our neighborhoods that we weren't aware of, like really just like getting to the foundation of the stuff that draws us together is kind of the point.
And so speaking to that point, what do you hope that the audience gets out of this new radio show? What are you looking for the community to take from it?
Go out and find something new you love about where you live. Because there's always something new to discover. There's no way you know everything about what's here. And hopefully we can help you a little bit in that.
And it's always exciting for me to hear the feedback of if I had a guest on the air that had a book out and they had a big event in regards to their book release that, oh, I heard about you on the radio, and then our event was sold out. So it's this culture building culture. So the radio itself becomes part of the curators of culture in the area, and then other people hear about it, then they go out and experience that culture, and it becomes this kind of revolving door of giving a feedback loop within the community.
Yeah, I know you want to set it up as a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah.
And so what are you looking for from the community as part of the show?
I want to hear the ideas of things that we haven't thought about yet. So we've been spending the last couple days and weeks coming up with things that we can talk about going forward in the future for a 5-day-a-week show. I'm sure there is tons of stones that we've left unturned. And so when people hear about this being something that will be on the airwaves relatively shortly, I hope that they'll reach out and say, did you know that XYZ happened in Chicopee in 1944? You know, that kind of thing. And bring those stories to us so that we can go and cover them. In addition to the fact we're hoping to have, you know, live audience interaction. I think that's another great thing that radio does, which it becomes a real-time sounding board, and it's usually a lot kinder than social media.
That's not, look, a phrase comes to mind about bars and floors.
Yeah. Yeah, so being able to interact with the audience in real time, especially if there's, you know, a big news story that's happened that day, and for the audience to be able to interact and reach a wider audience than just their kitchen tables, I think it's an interesting opportunity.
So for those listeners who are familiar with Mornings with Monte, they've gotten used to the familiar voices of the guests that you've had on over the years. Will listeners of this new show be able to recognize some of those voices? Will there be new voices on the show?
Both. First of all, Khalees Smith and her Nerd Watch became a very popular segment in the waning days of the show on the river, and she will continue to nerd out on this show.
There will always be new board games, and I will pretty much always get them.
I have a resident astronomer, Salman Hamid from Hampshire College, who's eager to participate again. The word nerd from Merriam-Webster, Emily Brewster. I'm hoping to talk about food and wine with wine snobs up and down the valley. I've had a regular standing chat with Congressman Jim McGovern, McGoverning with McGovern, I called it, which was a way for the audience to ask one of their congresspeople questions. So that and more, I hope.
And that does it for this edition of Connecting Point. Remember, you can always find all of the stories that you saw in this episode, as well as exclusive features, digital-only content, and so much more online anytime at nepm.org/connectingpoint. And please be sure to join us again every week right here for more stories of the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. I'm Saidalis Bauer. Thanks for watching and take care.
You know who she's talking about?
All right, ready?
I think she's talking about you.
No, it's definitely you. Stop it.
Support for Connecting Point is provided by our contributing viewers.
McDuffie.
Kathmandu.
Yes, that's correct.
As schools match wits, pits area high schools against each other in a fun, competitive quiz show.
Belchertown.
String.
Yes, you're right.
Play along with us on social media and tune in Saturday night at 7 as Belchertown takes on the McDuffie School on NEPM.
On Masterpiece.
Allow me to introduce you to the inner workings of the practice.
Helen may be able to help me understand how it all works.
Helen?
I used to run the farm's accounts.
Siegfried has never wanted a partner.
You shouldn't make promises you can't keep.
TB testing's really not popular with farmers.
If I can show him it'll bring in more money, maybe he'll change his mind.
All Creatures Great and Small on Masterpiece.
All Creatures Great and Small Season 3 continues Sunday at 9.
Ariana is a very special child. She's a definite gift. With Down syndrome, there are a lot of challenges, and PBS Kids really helps me as a parent. Ariana loves to watch Super Y.
Which letters did you find?
When Super Y was asking, what letters do you see? Ariana said A. She actually said A on her own. It made my heart jump for joy. And that's why I value PBS Kids.
Reparations for people of African descent in America is long overdue. We don't want a piece of freedom. We want the whole package.
The city of Evanston has pledged to give reparations to black residents.
This is American history. Give us what we're due.
The Big Payback, Monday at 10 on NEPM.
On American Experience, an influential author whose groundbreaking anthropological work would reclaim, honor, and celebrate Black life on its own terms.
She was an innovator, but the content is rooted in the research that she did.
It was anthropology that really showed Hurston that she could write about her culture.
Zora Neale Hurston, Claiming a Space on American Experience.
A portrait of Zora Neale Hurston, Tuesday at 9.
For many of us, the new year is the perfect time to look ahead to a brighter future and to think about what we want to accomplish in 2023. One smart and simple way to get the year started is to create a will through our partner, Free Will. A will can protect the people and causes you love. This small act of care for yourself and your loved ones can go a long way. Start your plans today at freewill.com/NEPM.
You're watching New England Public Media, WGBY Springfield.
In the 1960s, the air of resistance and turbulence helped create hip-hop. Hip-hop became our voice that was for so long silenced.
How hip-hop changed the world, January 31st, or stream at any